One of the most important requirements for people with hearing loss is not only to hear, but also to understand speech, and with as little effort as possible. This requires more than just hearing all the parts of speech. It requires that the brain receives the sounds in a way that makes it easier to process and understand. But how do we process sounds? The audible sounds for normal hearing people ranges from 0 to 110 decibels. With hearing loss, this range of audible sounds becomes narrower. The most obvious consequence of a hearing loss is the loss of sensitivity to soft sounds, which means that some of the important information from speech and the environment will be too soft and will not reach the brain. Even though the person cannot hear soft sounds, they can still perceive loud sounds as loud. The person with hearing loss needs something that amplifies soft sounds to make them audible. Traditionally, there have been two ways of amplifying sounds: linear and nonlinear amplification. Each of them has important advantages and drawbacks. Linear compression amplifies all sounds equally, which preserves important sound cues in their original form, making it easy for the brain to process. However, this way of amplifying is limited because soft sounds may not be amplified enough, while loud sounds can become too loud and distorted. Therefore, some sounds will not be audible, while others may be uncomfortably loud. Nonlinear amplification is about compressing all sounds into the narrow range of usable sounds of the person with the hearing loss. This is done by amplifying soft sounds to make them more audible and compressing loud sounds to prevent any discomfort. This squeezing operation has the great benefit of enabling the person to hear all sounds, whether soft or loud. But it also has an important drawback. It distorts the quality of the speech signal. As the speech cues are compressed into a narrower range, it becomes harder for the brain to decipher these cues and create meaning out of what is being heard. Oticon SpeechGuard-E is the solution to this dilemma. Oticon has introduced a revolutionary approach to signal processing that preserves the characteristics of sounds and makes it easier to understand speech in any given situation. SpeechGuard-E encompasses the benefits of linear and nonlinear amplification without the limitations of either approach. It ensures that all sounds are audible and comfortable, and at the same time, it maintains the naturally occurring level differences in the signal. SpeechGuard-E achieves this by using adaptive compression. Adaptive compression keeps the cues in the speech intact in order to safeguard speech understanding. In this sound sample, a woman is talking in the noisy environment of a restaurant. Sample 1 is recorded through a set of Oticon Nera 2 hearing instruments fitted with fast compression. Sample 2 is recorded through a set of Oticon Alta 2 hearing instruments fitted with SpeechGuard-E. Please observe the differences in the sound curves. Listen for the changes in the sound.
There is the herring and beet salad at Russ & Daughters, an appetizing store in Lower Manhattan. But the combination of beets and herring didn't quite seem like a strong enough draw. A herring and potato salad. There is the herring and beet salad at Russ & Daughters, an appetizing store in Lower Manhattan. But the combination of beets and herring didn't quite seem like a strong enough draw. A herring and
By comparing the two, you see that the peaks are higher and the dips are lower with adaptive compression. By preserving more details of the sound, you also preserve the vital speech cues that make it easier and more effortless for the brain to understand what is being said. To analyze further, let's zoom in on a section of the sound curves and compare them to investigate the differences. Why is there such a difference between the two sound curves? Even with the slightest change in input, fast compression still works continuously. To illustrate fast compression, imagine that the compression is constantly changing with every little alteration in the sound. Adaptive compression uses a window of 12 decibels for the sound to pass through. As long as the sound fits within the window, the compression doesn't change. The compression only kicks in when the change in the sound input exceeds the 12 dB window. Adaptive compression provides both natural sound and comfortable amplification. It gives a better preservation of the speech cues and contrasts in natural speech. This makes it easier for the brain to differentiate the meaningful sounds from the noise and understand speech. With SpeechGuard E, it becomes less demanding to follow the thread of a conversation, even in very complex and noisy situations. SpeechGuard E is only available in Oticon Premium hearing instruments. Dr. Andrea Pittman, Ph.D., Associate Professor, has conducted studies on SpeechGuard E at the Department of Speech and Hearing at Arizona State University. Her research shows the benefits of adaptive compression compared to other types of compression.
In this study, we examined the effects of fast, slow, and adaptive compression on the ability of children and adults with hearing loss to perform complex tasks. Stephanie, thank you so much for coming in.
No, you're welcome.
We really appreciate your time for our research. Until recently, manufacturers had to choose how fast or how slowly they wanted their amplitude compression speed to work. And they really had to use a philosophical decision because the research suggests that either is just as good as the other, although there is a price that you pay for using fast or slow compression, and so it's really a choice between which one is the least objectionable. For fast-acting compression, because it works so quickly, it can distort the speech signal. Slow-acting compression doesn't do that. It has a nice, crisp, clean speech signal because it works very slowly on the signal. But the problem with slow-acting compression is that it's kind of behind the times. It's slow. What the hearing aid user hears is that after a loud sound, there's a period where the hearing aids don't seem to be working. And so they will complain that hearing aids sort of drop out every time something loud happens. And so it's like the hearing aid kind of pumps in and out.
So you're going to hear a sound followed by a word, and I'd like you to tell me if that word is a person, a food, or an animal.
Ideally, what we would like is a system that combines the best of slow-acting compression and the best of fast-acting compression. And that's what has been done in adaptive compression, particularly what Oticon has designed in their SpeechGuard E. The easiest way to understand the differences in performance between the slow, fast, and adaptive compression is to listen to the stimuli and also to look at a graphic representation of them. So what it shows is the combination of the three WAV files together. So here is the bird call in this particular example, and it sounds like a chicken clucking. And then buried within that, or partially buried within that, is the word lifeguard. And so the first portion is in and being masked by the bird call, whereas part of that word is not being masked, and that's what the listener needs to hear in order to make a judgment. Now, when it's processed by slow compression, the waveform shows that the bird call, the amplitude of the bird call is reduced, which is what we want to see. That makes it comfortable for the hearing aid user. Because the slow compression takes its time to get back up to an amplitude that's appropriate amplification, we see that the overall increase in the amplification over time, and you can hear it in the signal. With fast compression, we see a similar effect on the bird call. It reduces the amplitude there to make it comfortable, but it also it gets back to its original amplification very quickly, so it's louder overall, but it's louder because it's amplifying some of that background noise, and that's what makes it a little bit more difficult to pull the word out of the noise. And so you'll hear this as a little bit louder and a little bit noisier. When it's processed with adaptive compression, you see similar effects. The amplitude of the bird call is reduced, but what you'll hear is a clearer signal for the portion that is not being masked by the environmental sound. And when you put all three of them together on the same graph, what you see is that there's very little differences here, but there is a bit more of a clear difference between the adaptive compression and the other two, and those little differences actually make large differences in their performance.
Food. Animal. Don't know. Person.
When the best of both the slow and the fast compression characteristics were put together in the adaptive system, the performance of both groups increased significantly, and they both received the same amount of benefit. So although these bars look a little bit different, they are statistically the same, and so both groups benefited from the adaptive compression. Our overall conclusions from this study was that the adaptive compression parameters have real potential to benefit children and adults who are in dynamic, active listening environments. But anyone who is in a more quiet and stable environment would still receive benefit from an adaptive compression.
All right, you're all finished. You did a great job. Thank you so much.
These results suggest to us that in systems like the SpeechGuard E that have an adaptive compression that takes the best of both fast and slow compression parameters and combines it into one system, that those children and adults in dynamic listening environments are likely to benefit greatly from that kind of an amplification system. Well, anyone interested in learning more about the details of the study can read the published article in the Journal of the American Academy of Audiology.